more for being here and to be present for the fourth talk in the series of talk, actually a briefing printout that we organized this year. And for this special event, we have the founders of PHILE magazine, that is this one, that you can actually also buy in our library, but we are gonna have a small presentation, and also I think you're gonna show some of the interviews and stuff that you are in it. For the ones who don't know, actually briefing printout born because we wanted to bring together some editorial projects that were somehow connected by self-care. And self-care because of some magazines were emphasizing the importance of desire, relaxation, and in this case I'm talking specifically about PHILE magazine and Hammam magazine, the one we presented the last time, and also spirituality as Vinota Goods, the book we presented the previous talk. And so now we are pretty excited to hear this. This was one of my favorite one, the PHILE one. So I think we should start saying something more if you guys want to introduce about why you started this kind of magazine and the reason behind and with full presentation. I just want to thank, as usual, our sponsor who supported the event, Collezione Godino, who decided to support the entire briefing printout, and also Maria Armando Cabral and Fundação. Oh my God, I have forgot. And no Fundação. DG Artes. A Fundação. Okay, na Fundação support, yes. By the way, yeah, we can start if you guys want.
Okay.
I'll leave you the floor.
I'm Mike, in case you haven't met me yet.
I'm Erin.
So, we're the editors of PHILE. I'm just going to read some notes because I have a bad memory. So PHILE is a publication that investigates sexuality from a sociological point of view. Our subtitle is the International Journal of Desire and Curiosity. So when we initially started, we kind of had the idea of blending like an academic journal with a more traditional sex magazine. We released the first issue, which is right here, in the summer of 2017, and our fifth and final issue just released this year, last week actually. So I want to start with some of our inspirations leading into PHILE. The kind of biggest inspiration was a publication called Eros, which, if you've never heard of it, it was started by Ralph Ginsberg. It only lasted 1 year, it was in 1962. The graphic designer on Eros was named Herb Lubalin, and they together made Avant-Garde magazine, which is kind of famous. The type font, Avant-Garde, was created for that publication. We were interested in Eros because it offered sophisticated and critical subtexts which covered sexuality in history, politics, art, and literature. And the other interesting thing about it was that Ralph Ginsberg was subject to obscenity laws in America, so that's why it only lasted 1 year. He was actually sentenced to prison, not strictly because of obscenity, but based on that. There was a photo shoot with an interracial couple, just nude, kind of embracing each other, which created a huge stir. This was in 1962, so nothing like that had ever been seen before. Eventually, he was basically sued because of advertising through the mail about sexuality. And a funny thing is that their PO box was in Intercourse, Pennsylvania, which he chose on purpose to kind of create a stir. So that was one of our biggest inspirations, this one. Another one is called Research, which was created by Vivale in the 90s. It's like a series of publications that touch on all types of topics, mostly subcultural. One being Bob Flanagan, who's like a famous masochist artist who had cystic fibrosis, which is like a chronic pain disorder. So he started getting into masochism and sadism, and he created a huge body of work. Anyway, that was another one of the publications. For our designers who aren't here, they're based in Canada. Their inspirations were Twen, which was a German publication, which was from 59 to 71, and also Perspecta, which is the Yale Architecture Journal, which is the longest running student
academic journal.
Yeah.
And yeah, just our designers pulled from those specifically to like really find a tension between the academic style and a traditional smutty magazine, which you'll see in our issues was a huge inspiration for us. And so when building our brand identity and figuring out what kind of content we wanted to produce, it was really important for us to kind of keep our content cerebral. You know, we say we're an international journal, and we're approaching everything from a sociological point of view, so we did want our content to be very intellectual but still accessible. So, you know, we don't want you guys to have a master's degree in order to like understand. We want it to be super accessible. At the beginning, we were saying it was like for everyone, by everyone. And so I specifically work as the managing editor and Mike is the art director. And so working with the writers too, a lot of my job, especially working with scholars or artists who are like very big on art speak, you know, I'm like, okay, please like speak English, and really kind of like working to put everything in layman's terms, because we want anyone to be able to pick up this magazine and to enjoy it and not feel alienated, because sex can already be alienating. And also with our content, it was very important for us to have a very diverse masthead and roster. Like our subtitle is the International Journal, so we were pulling people from different countries, different backgrounds, different races, different sexualities, and essentially inviting them to tell their perspective. Because something like this is also kind of tricky, you know, we don't want to be exploitative. It is a very sensitive topic, and we don't want to fetishize fetishes, so to speak. So we have to figure out like a really delicate way to do that, and the best way I think in any circumstance is to just like give these people a platform to tell their own stories, to tell their own perspectives. And in doing that, it allows the reader and us personally to understand the complexities of human desire, and in turn understand our own erotic expression by understanding how others kind of navigate that space. And another huge part of our content is humor. Something we both learned, but something I learned so much doing this publication is that humor is an incredible tool to access people. You know, it's a very tense time, it's a very political time, and talking about queer politics and sex is already very difficult. So we use humor very much so in this publication because it allows people to just kind of like let go, and like we said, it kind of like keeps everything accessible. A lot of what this magazine is our brainstorming sessions and with our designers who are also just freaks, you know, and a lot of it is just like jokes. It's our jokes. We come up with jokes, we put it in the magazine, and you know, if we have fun, I think our readers will have fun, and that really, I think, comes across in our content.
Yeah, definitely makes very accessible because, yeah, the first time that, the first actually essays that I read, it was from the issue 4, and it was the one about the guy collecting sperm all around Europe.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was so great. Also, the mood that he was building through the article, because it was not obsessive, it was not weird. It was like, there was a good balance between all the elements, and so you were not like saying ew or not even haha. You know, it was very calculated.
Yeah, and I think at this time people tend to take themselves a little too seriously across the board. So
Yeah.
we tried not to do that.
Make it a little cheeky.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
And also the picture that you actually are, especially now talking of the last issue. I don't know if you guys had the occasion to see, but they are amazing because in a way, it's not just fetishism. It's like building this aesthetic, but in still with humor in a way.
And yeah, also, I mean, my favorite
Yeah.
joke, this is our last issue,
Yeah, we are gonna talk.
and there's just a tombstone that says gay. So I mean, that's like very telling of our sense of humor and our designers. They usually will just throw things in for us to find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can talk a bit about
Yeah, please.
all these issues too. So this is our first issue. When we started it, we were definitely leaning towards more of an academic angle, which is why we kind of used a graphic cover. It was sort of going to be a motif for a moment through all of them, which obviously changed as we went. We also, if anyone's nerdy about printing, we printed on Swiss bound, so like the spine is not attached to the cover, which allows the pages to open fully so you can see all the images well. It's also very expensive, so we only did it once.
For the first one.
Exactly, start off there. So what else is in here? We have, oh yeah, this is an article on John Harvey Kellogg, who created Kellogg's cornflakes. He was a famous, aside from the company, he also was like very into health and wellness, but he was also very against masturbation and sex, premarital sex. So Kellogg's cornflakes were actually invented to subdue people, and so that they would have less of like a libidinal urge.
And graham crackers too.
And graham crackers was
Invented.
also. So yeah, we can
Stop
boycott them. If you eat them, maybe stop eating. What else? We did an interview with Annie Sprinkle and Elizabeth Stevens. Annie Sprinkle is like a famous porn actress from the 70s who's a feminist writer, and her partner had this project where they married different parts of the earth over a series of time. They kind of created the term ecosexual.
And what started as an art practice eventually became a sexual practice, and people kind of identify as an ecosexual, when whatever that means to them. But their whole ethos is treating Earth as lover, not mother, because mother takes care of you, but lovers take care of each other.
Yeah. I can pass these around
Yeah.
too. If you guys want to. In our second issue, we still kept the blobby shape, but we, went a little bit further with it. Let's see. There's a story about Dionysus.
And in this, we got a little less academic in terms of the format, in that the first issue we definitely used, we commissioned some of our own artwork, but a lot of it was found or pulled from other artists, whereas in this issue we started producing our own imagery.
These are all screenshots for this article, but this is a queer porn collective in Brooklyn called the Aorta. So we did a feature on them. I think I was covering that.
No, you were.
So yeah, it was important to show like alternative forms of pornography too. We don't consider ourselves like a pornographic magazine at all, but definitely talking about pornography because it's a big part of sexuality in the media. And then we have our story about a photo essay on a gear fetish meeting that was in America our friend went to and documented. So basically they just like dress up in all kinds of gear and have like play time, they play football and they have like a shower scene after where they all have sex. They all, there's this like group mummify session where they all get wrapped up in mummy suits.
Yeah, what's great is so we were always open to accepting submissions from people. It didn't matter. And Zach, it's funny now thinking about it because we're friends with him now, but we didn't know him at the time. And he just emailed us being like, hey, here's this photo shoot. We're like, cool, like, we'll take it.
Yeah. This is an interesting article which Erin wrote actually about fifis. It all started because of these sculptures that Kenya Robinson created. Do you want to talk about it?
Sure. So yeah, Kenya created these sculptures on these tools that are colloquially called fifis, which are sex toys that are made in prison from tools that they find in the commissary. Because most people don't realize that sex and even masturbation are contraband in prison, and so if somebody is caught masturbating, that they can actually get like time added onto their sentence in America.
Wow.
So sex is just like completely illegal in all forms, which is impossible. Yeah, it's impossible that you can't suppress sexual desire. So the fact that fifis even exist kind of represent the just true resistance of that and the vitality of sexuality in this space, because it is not suppressed but takes on a new form.
And the humanity, because that's what they're trying to strip from people.
Yeah.
These are like kind of a classic looking fifi. It's generally like a roll of towel with a glove inserted inside.
Right.
So she made her own versions using kind of everyday objects.
That's interesting.
We did a interview with our favorite drag queen, Christine. I don't know if you know her, but look her up if you
Yeah,
don't.
she's
Oh yeah, this is Look Who's a Rabbit. It was written by Ashkan Sepavand and illustrations by Sufiana Bagri. So this is about fetishization of Arab people, in particular in Paris, or Europe, but it's kind of based in Paris.
And also an analysis how that correlates to the war on terror, that like once September 11th kind of hit, there you would start seeing porn that kind of framed the Arab man as like a savage, and also the kind of the antithesis of like the ever-growing effeminate like Euro man, you know, like the kind of, what's the word, metrosexual, kind of like Euro hairless man. And so in these kinds of portrayals, you see Arab men kind of as these like rough, primal men, and his experience kind of navigating through Paris through his own personal expression. It's a beautiful, beautiful essay.
And then we also, we had an insert in this issue, a little comic by Eric Costick Williams.
He's from Toronto.
Yeah, from Toronto. It's called Bathhouse at the End of the World, so it's sort of like a post-apocalyptic story of someone's adventure in a bathhouse. It was kind of amusing, and then it won,
It got a notable selection for Best American Comics in 2019.
That's cool.
And then we printed on glossy paper for this photo essay on female masking, which is a fetish where men put on a female, like a latex mask, dressed in all latex. So we really wanted to like show the texture of the images of the materials. Kind of scary, but just this one. And then, this is kind of interesting too. We have a friend who has a severe phobia to vomiting, and she's been going through immersion therapy, different kinds. And she was like, I always wanted to talk to someone who has a fetish for that, to try to understand it more. So we found someone on FetLife who was into it, and arranged this interview with them, talking about that, which was very interesting. This is the last part. Even though we find ourselves at opposite ends of the spectrum, we are both longing for the same thing. Our fears and desires are seemingly disparate, our lust and repulsion. control and lack thereof, philia and phobia, yet we are united by our underlying instinct to care and be cared for.
Yes, because
And it sounds
her
good.
fear of vomiting, she was afraid of like being caught vomiting alone and having nobody to take care of her.
Okay.
Whereas his fetish revolved around being the caregiver. Like that's why he was into it, was that he wanted to take care of somebody.
Something else we added to all the back was like a nod to back pages in the sex magazines. So some of these are actually from Craigslist, personals. Some of them we made up. The designers used tart cards, old tart cards, as inspiration for the design of some of these. And then we also advertised some of our friends, like Sex, Love Kim,
Okay. I was gonna ask, how did you collect this? I mean, because it's something that now is not that usual anymore
Yeah.
to find this kind of
Well, because that's like a big thing that we were going to talk about in a second, but the censorship on the internet, like there's no back page or backpage.com is gone, the Craigslist personals are gone. So it's kind of like an ode to that, like printing them so that they're living forever.
But all of these Craigslist little ads we found.
Yeah.
Most of them are real.
Mhm.
Most of them.
I'm like trying to, I don't even know if I want to read them.
Yeah, but you could pass it around.
So then, this is our third issue. The cover is by Ian Birch. He's an artist in New York. When we created this one, it was right around the time that we got our Instagram deleted, which was after we had Facebook deleted. Since then, we've had YouTube, Vimeo, even our Shopify payment account is suspended still because they deem our content pornographic, which is kind of ridiculous. So this issue, we kind of leaned into that a bit. We started off with a photo series of all found images, which were like kind of like Tumblr-based. The idea of that recycled images, and Wiki Commons, which is kind of a great place to find anything. I found like most of these on. Oh yeah, I took that one.
Yeah, that's
actually.
nice hands. But yeah, this definitely became our most provocative issue because essentially on our social media we were pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable as community guidelines because nothing we were posting had nudity. Because we were kind of showing these non-normative expressions of sexual desire. And so we were really careful not to put anything like no nudity, no genitalia, it's just people innocently bathing in spaghetti. Like there's nothing wrong with that.
It's kind of easy to like put that stuff, you know, like
so,
showing a photo of a foot.
Yeah.
No one's gonna think that like it's not illegal or against their guidelines, but a lot of people would think it's sexy.
Exactly. So we were playing with that, and then after many times getting removed, we were like, okay, you want us to be provocative. We'll show you what's provocative. And we put some pretty graphic images in there.
And then we did this this article on female ejaculation, squirting, which is kind of about the idea of like women, like the, how is it? Like, I don't know
what you're trying to say.
Like the proof of pleasure is the name of the article.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
for men it's obvious, and sort of it's kind of about this
Yeah,
idea.
like a physical ejaculate.
Yeah. So we made this
Oh wow, it's a
insert.
poster.
It's a poster kind of based on Bruno Minari.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And we had Amalie Matalon take all these photos of like different hand positions.
And we named
We all
them.
named-
This is also just an example of Mike and I
This isn't
joking.
even like, these aren't real things.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're
maybe
not.
some of these hand things are
No,
real,
what did
but-
we name them?
The grand finale.
Yodel in the Canyon.
Ooh.
The Melissa Etheridge.
Oh.
Oh, the Four-Finger Dinger. So, that was a late night brainstorming session for Mike and I.
Yes, that was fun. And then we have this article was, or this story was written by PHILE, who was here last week, I think.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
And Yao Gabriel, who's Portuguese.
João, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Like with that.
João,
Yeah. Yesterday was like different techniques to say.
Yeah, a beautiful painting.
Yes. And it was about the idea of the term morboso in Spanish, which means like morbid, but also kind of sexy in that untraditional way, I guess. Oh yeah, and then this was also around the time that FOSTA and SESTA were created in America, which I'm not sure you are too familiar with. FOSTA is the Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, SESTA Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act, and this is sort of when Backpage.com was shut down.
And why, this is the reason why there are no classifieds online anymore.
And because there was like an instance of sex trafficking on Backpage, they basically shut it down, but it ended up being this kind of crusade to end anything.
Any kind of sex work
based stuff online.
And what's crazy is it not only threatens sex working online, but pretty much the freedom of speech online, because it's essentially when the internet was created in order to keep it this kind of utopian freedom of expression, websites were not liable for what people posted on their website. And so FOSTA SESTA claims to do this for child trafficking, but essentially now all of these websites are liable for anything that's posted, so the only way to regulate it is to shut it down because it's just impossible.
But really it makes it harder to find sex trafficking.
Yeah, it just pushes trafficking further underground. So yeah, it was a very intense time when we were working with Lindsay Dye, who's a webcammer who wrote this article. And this was also a big reason why we saw our accounts being taken down, not just our accounts, but like queer accounts, people, any person who was sex positive. It was just like a wipe across the board. So we got pretty vocal about it and you know, spoke up.
Yeah, and that also affected like payment processors online. So people who do webcamming and pornography online have to pay a lot of money to process payments now, and it's like very spotty. Things get shut down all the time, which is like actually why ours got shut down, based off of these sort of.
So in order for us to accept credit cards on our website on Shopify, we have to pay a lot extra to accept credit cards. So you can pay with PayPal.
For now, until they shut us down.
Yeah, until they shut us down too.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because of like Ralph Ginsburg. He kind of progressed censorship laws a lot, and people like him would like intentionally sometimes go to court in order to fight these laws in order to make it more open, which is why we are able to do this, and so many other people. But now it's moved online, and the idea of like community guidelines, which was meant to actually pertain to like small geographical areas, is now put on the internet where it doesn't make sense. It's an international audience.
And the people who are creating these guidelines aren't governments anymore, or even the church, but
or the post office,
but companies, like huge conglomerates who are choosing what's morally acceptable and what's not, which is a huge problem.
Yeah, because they pay the commercial of this
and
company.
They're not moral.
Totally, the way they produce their stuff is not moral at all. Yeah, the image is the thing. It's not the content.
All for the sake of the children.
The children they used to produce.
Yeah.
These are some drawings by Becca Muslimova, who is one of our favorites. She's very funny. She has this character called Kylie B that she draws and paints.
It reminds me of color book.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, makes you wanna color that. That's so
You
nice.
could. And then the fourth one you may have seen, it's here. And this is really when we kind of went into getting into more commercial aesthetics and language. here's a sculpture I drew in my garden with cock ring. So yeah, you talked about the European Union collecting all of those loads.
Yeah. That was great. That was amazing. The discovery
these?
of the wow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's like a land artist from the 60s, 70s, I think. So he created this series of drawings that were paintings that are just amazing.
Yeah, and actually it was not that easy to find material about him.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed about his work. I mean,
Yeah.
it's-
Most of his work, it's like when you Google him, it's like these huge land pieces in Egypt or Morocco, I think.
No, they-
But they're just so sexy and tense and like pretty.
And the fact that they were made at the end of 60s, at the beginning of 70s, even more special.
Totally, they look contemporary.
Totally.
Do you want to talk about
Sure. This is an interview with Kenya Robinson, who made those Fifi sculptures, and Milena William Haas, who is a pretty infamous sexual slave. She, usually talks about her expression. She's married to an Austrian composer, and they have kind of like a master-slave relationship, but specifically she speaks about her relationship with, being a black woman and being a slave and how those two correlate. And it's really beautiful and touching. And she's hilarious. If you ever get a chance to just look her up, she does these amazing talks and she's just so funny. But that was, a really special one.
And then this is the cover story. Photos taken by Mark Mezian, who's like a mainly commercial photographer, fashion photographer. And we worked with a designer in Amsterdam named Nina Muna and Damask, which is a famous latex shop there.
Okay.
So we were inspired by predicament bondage, which was like kind of famous in the 70s. There was a bunch of artists who would create these illustrations, like Bob Bishop, where people are in these kind of crazy predicaments. So we,
like being tied up, for example, or like the cover story, as you see, like resting on nails, like they have to hold this very uncomfortable position or else they'll step on a nail.
yeah, it's basically you have like two choices. One is like bad, the other one's worse. You don't want to talk about it?
No, it's fine. We so a lot of this this article in particular was a result of us being called out in Toronto because we commissioned a woman to do a shibari performance, which is Japanese rope bondage, and she came on in a kimono. It caused quite a
And she
stir.
was white.
Yeah, she was a white woman wearing a kimono.
Ah.
So we were really confronted with like, what is accountability? Because essentially these people just kind of wanted to see us flogged online, and to be shamed online. And we were like, okay, we can do that, but that's not really helping anyone or educating anyone. So what's the best way to do that? And also none of the people who were calling us out were Japanese. So we were like, okay, well, we want to talk to like a Japanese person about this. So we commissioned an article on the history of shibari and the fetishization of Japanese people in Western culture in order to educate ourselves, to have like a real conversation about that issue, and to educate our audience as well.
Yeah, I found it particularly interesting at the end of the article where after explaining how the practice is practiced, it was also giving context about the history and the manipulation of that. So it's so important, especially because we are collecting different stories from all over the world. So to always contextualize what are you telling was very educative. Was the educational was a group of it.
Yeah, and I think we really wanted to kind of address that. Especially in Canada at that time, it was so intense, but this call-out culture wasn't necessarily, it it wasn't productive, you know, and you know, because we have seen people who are like chronic abusers who get through the system because they've mastered that performative language of apologizing, and they can kind of slip through the cracks, and see people who I think, you know, are innocent, who are completely ostracized from their communities and can never look back. So we wanted to do that in kind of a very productive way, and like we said, involve the people who it actually affects and bring them into the conversation and give them a platform to tell their story. So Midori, who essentially wrote the English guidebook on Shibari, wrote that article.
Okay. And actually, you have also the glossary at the end of each one, right?
Yeah, and the glossaries
If you
are
the last one.
really special. In issue 1 and 2, we had Magdalena Suksi write them, and in the last ones, we had Robert Anthony O'Halloran write them. So as you can see, also in this last issue, we changed the back pages to be a bit more.
They're also all based on OnlyFans accounts.
And
'Cause
these
it was
are
like,
real.
oh, we can kind of actually use, like everyone's making porn now, so.
Yeah. So we offered free advertisements for sex
wow.
workers on OnlyFans. So we got
How
all.
did you choose?
We had
I
a
have
lot
a-
to choose
I
from.
have-
What were the criteria? No, I'm curious.
Oh no, I asked a bunch of people I knew, and then we put a call out
We put a
on
call out on
Instagram.
Instagram. But in each issue, we have the glossary of terms playing on that kind of like academic journal. But they're pretty funny. Like they're jokes. I recommend reading. Don't skip the glossary, because they're one of my favorite parts of the magazine.
Another thing we started doing in the 4th issue was I am kind of obsessed with DeviantArt.com. I don't know if anyone's been on there, but there's a lot of fetish artists on there that it's all based in fantasy, a lot of like gore and giantess stuff. So we started printing these, which is kind of a nice way, because these things only live online in this sort of realm, so like immortalizing them in print, placing them in a new context. So these are all these like muscle girls that
Muscle Girl
this guy
baby
created.
faces.
But he also
Muscle
writes
Girl.
stories for all of them, and they all have names. It's like Kimmy is in one of those moods. Her team did not make the Super Bowl, and this dumbass decided to taunt her since his team did. Bad idea. Kimmy loves her team. Take your sweet time with him, Kimmy. And this is her giving him a $10. So yeah.
And our last issue has been a long time in the making, like 2 years, but what was so funny about this issue is we started making it pre-COVID, and we were like, we want to make it kind of this like hyper-capitalist, in the near future, hyper-capitalist, almost like post-apocalyptic, wonderland, and then COVID hit, and like all of our content was super relevant. We were like, wow, did we just predict the future? But this was all printed on glossy paper, and as you can see, it's just like very slick, very commercial. Like we wanted almost everything to look like an ad or feel like a catalog. And like we have this like kind of fake furniture catalog with Anna Udenberg, her sculptures that are called pervertibles. And this essay on a very famous necrophiliac or necrophile from the 70s named Karen Greenlee by Alyssa Bennett, and it's very beautiful. It's dark, but it's beautiful.
It's one of the stories that even I think now that Netflix is taking all these weird things, is one of those will never arrive to Netflix. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's that I mean, if you want
Maybe.
to tell something about the story.
Someone did
but
make a movie
Yeah,
about
someone
it,
made
I
a
see.
but
movie about her, but it's like not, I don't think very good.
yeah, exactly. No, on Netflix.
Yeah.
No.
And Charlie Engman went to China and photographed a sex robot convention,
Oh, wow.
and the photos are so bizarre. So yeah, take a look through and enjoy.
That was so fun because in one of these pictures there were a QR code and actually a scanner.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, of course I did. And there is the list
Oh
of
wow,
the
that's amazing.
the two
Oh yeah.
of them selling something.
Oh, that.
Here it is.
Oh, yeah.
Did you scan it? Yeah, it appears the whole catalog.
There
And I was
a-
like, oh my god, I should scan it.
In the same exhibit, there was a sex doll that was modeled after a famous actress in China, and she was actually there, and they're sitting side by side. But the interesting thing is they make the sex dolls to kind of cartoony slightly to avoid like Uncanny Valley, where it's like kind of creepy. It's like too human realistic. So they're all like, there's always something a little off about them.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is our 5th and last issue, and I mean there's a lot of reasons why we decided to end. I mean independent publishing is kind of a sadistic thing to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say also like talking about self-care. I think that had something to do
Yeah, I
with
think
At some point you should stop.
yeah. But we think 5 is a great number and a nice little collection. And I think we just also wanted to end on this kind of like, you know, through line of censorship from our inspiration to the censorship that we kind of experienced and how it all comes full circle. You know, like all of our inspirations were all censored for what they did. People even went to jail. And with the birth of the internet, we, you know, got so many promises of this kind of utopia for free expression, where now we see everything's just completely run by these social media conglomerates. And now really the only place that we can, you know, express ourselves is in print. It's the only free place. So we hope that our collection kind of serves as a little capsule for that and inspires people to put their thoughts out on, you know, out into the world through print. Because independent publishing, as difficult as it is a very important medium.
Mhm.
So
I'm
please.
sure it will. I mean, as it was important for you, Eros, you know, because actually when I read one of your interviews talking about, I didn't know about Eros, and it's such a good inspiration. And so I'm sure it's not gonna like disappear
Yeah.
your experience here.
Well, since we started also, there's been so many other independent publications coming out about sexuality and desire, so it's great to see.
Yeah.
I have curiosity. Why purple, violet, or I mean, there is a lot.
I guess
Yeah.
purple's the color of sexual, what's the word? Not aggression, but I forget. That's not why though. I was
It is, no, there is a significance with sexuality in purple, the kind
Yeah.
of like,
Well, it's like a queer color.
Yeah,
It
it's-
often represents
Yeah.
freedom and,
it's not gendered,
Yeah.
you know, and it's vibrant enough, it's like titillating that, you know.
when we were going through the design near the beginning, it was almost like a yellow color we were contemplating, like almost like that, or like the Tannehill
Oh, yeah,
color.
the neon yellow.
Yeah, kind of neon yellow, but the purple is where we all landed. But yeah, it's just kind of, I guess, to us signifies sort of queerness and like a general sexual idea, like, you know, not placing anything in any category.
No, totally. But since it looks like precise the season, we took at some point.
It was also the Pantone color of the year after
I see.
2018.
Just say it.
We predicted
The
that.
2017 it was.
You predict a lot of things.
Yes. When was the
Okay.
color of the year?
I think
It
it
was
was
2018. It was after we published. But no.
Almost
And
the
we've
same color.
we've contemplated changing the colors throughout, but we're like, no, let's keep
No,
the
it's
purple.
great. And I think now with the last issue, the black, you know,
Yeah.
it reached the maximum.
Yeah.
Style, kind of, you know, it's perfect. Just, you know, that is the last issue because
Yeah.
it's perfect.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any. I mean, I'm sure you.
I have a bunch of
I
questions.
know.
Listen, I
I
never
told
shut
you.
up. I'm sorry.
No.
No, I'm gonna start by the end because I think it's self-publishing is a monster, but it's also incredibly addictive.
Yes.
You've ended this, but I'm sure that you have other things that you'd like to publish. Do you have any plans, or or did you just end publishing?
Well, the thing with PHILE that we didn't mention is that we were more than just a publication as well. Our expression really was a multidisciplinary thing. From our social media, we created a video library, an archive library, and our events, which our events actually were like a main staple of our business model, which is how, but also was an extension of our ethos as like come as you are and creating space for this kind of queer sex positive community. So we've ended PHILE under that umbrella, but I'm sure Mike and I will continue doing stuff, like that's queer and freaky. I don't think we'll ever not do that. But definitely an extension of those mediums to not just publishing, but those themes I think will continue on. But I'm curious to explore something different. And I don't know, who knows what'll happen.
Yeah. I don't have much interest in independent publishing.
Well, it's just,
No, because and then art is so important to the process of thinking about these things. Would you consider opening or running a program of exhibitions that tackle these issues, or
Right.
Well,
right
other-
before, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Right before COVID, actually, we were speaking with the Museum of Sex in New York to start doing some exhibitions there with them, like guest curating. And then COVID happened, and then everyone that worked there quit. And so, yeah, it never went anywhere, but it's something we are interested in, for sure. Because to me, editing a magazine is very much like curating something, right? So it just kind of makes sense as a progression.
Yeah. And I'm actually going to school in September for curatorial studies,
Oh.
and was told them, I was like, I don't know, I've never curated anything before, and they're like, no, you have. You have. So it will definitely be an
Nice.
extension of this practice
Yeah.
as well.
Because again, you did. It's very curatorial, and so
Any other questions?
I was wondering again, because you mentioned humor and how you wanted to, play with humor as part of the magazine. I was wondering if you thought of, doing any sort of research on laughter and sex.
It's interesting.
I don't know, just because, people who love laughing while they have sex, or people who get off from laughter.
Yeah. Well, you had that. No, sorry.
I do like to
That
laugh
was-
when I have
that was
sex.
like-
See, I know, so
No, it's true. I
did
think
it
it's a healthy
go
part
into,
of sex
exactly,
to
no,
kind of break out
It
of
also
that.
that
Exactly.
seriousness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
I'm
I was
sorry,
just wondering
referring
if
to
that
the
kind of-
encyclopedia video, I think there was a laugh.
Oh, tickle fetish. Yeah.
but it's
Tickle-
different,
Yeah.
because
different.
I was just wondering if that found a way into the magazine.
No, I've never heard of a specific fetish in involving just laughter, but there must be.
Oh yeah, if I've learned anything
Yeah.
doing this magazine is if you can think of it,
It exists.
Yeah.
for sure. And Reddit has become a very good resource.
You can talk later if
Yeah.
you have any sure.
Yeah.
But also, that's, I mean, a reason why we use humor, because we're like, sex is fun, you know, it's
Yeah.
fun,
Yeah.
it's funny, it's not serious, like it shouldn't be serious, so
Yeah.
we wanted to, you know, exemplify that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Again,
No, no.
Sorry.
Yes.
because I'm really curious about the process, because it is a self-contained series of publications, 5, and there was a process behind it. And now that you're done with it, what have you learned from doing this project that you didn't know beforehand? And I'm not asking directly about the inside workings of publishing,
Right.
about an overall kind of idea of what the magazine is about, basically.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because you did a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
I think we, at least I was, especially us at the beginning, were really taken aback by the reception of the magazine. I think people, we kind of promoted before it was even there. We kind of hit the ground running, told people we were making it, and people were really hungry to be involved. Like our first issue, there are some amazing heavy hitters in there. A. Bronson, Annie Sprinkles, Dennis Cooper, and all of these people had every reason to say no to what we were doing, but they were all super enthusiastic because especially at that time in 2017, people were really hungry to make space for that, and we had a really incredible reception of the magazine, whether it's our events or the magazine or our social media, because I think people really long for that. That's what I learned the most, and obviously what keeps me warm and fuzzy at night, thinking of everyone who loves and embraces the magazine. But it's really because we felt like we were filling a void that wasn't there before, and now I think because queer and sexual politics have become so much a part of the zeitgeist, that hole is now filled. No pun intended. But that's what, I don't know, that's what came to mind for me.
I am still thinking about it. I'm gonna need more time.
I learned nothing.
I know, I learned so much, but it's what's a summary of it? I don't know.
To give you more time, Ed, just gonna, you need more time, because I was thinking of what you just said about curatorship, and I think that's kind of satisfaction of having a yes after a request and saying, I should ask this artist to show, or I should involve them to do whatever, a talk, a performance, and having a yes, and then this kind of confirmation really helps you to keep going and to do. So I think you are exactly.
And something I learned from a curatorial or managerial point of view is never ask someone to change what they're doing to give you a specific product. Like if you're looking for a specific thing, don't hire an artist to replicate something else. You get somebody who's already doing what you want, and you let them just go off.
And then you just trust.
Because then
the
you
best.
have a great creative, the artist is enthusiastic, and you end up with a wonderful product that's a very real expression of themselves. So that's something I learned from a managerial point of view.
And director.
Directorial.
Yeah, it's you have to get the pieces in order and really think about them before and make sure that it's going to mesh and then let it happen. We kind of just facilitate the magazine, in other words.
Yeah, because there's no budgets in independent publishing, so you want the artists to be satisfied with what they produce, and if you're giving them an opportunity to be as creatively free as they can be, which is super rare, especially in a commercial perspective, they'll say yes, and they'll be excited and create something amazing.
I think I've got one. Do you feel like it created some sort of legacy? Do you think people will take it from here to just develop their own things and perhaps another magazine, perhaps other curatorial choices and projects like you've mentioned before?
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think from the feedback that we've gotten, and especially with it being the last one and people very kind of like panicking about getting the whole set, which are no longer available. Yeah, I would definitely hope so. I think it's dangerous to think about yourself that way.
Yeah, that's what I initially thought too. But
Like-
I have seen like I've seen things that people have created that are certainly inspired by what we've done. Even on a smaller level, like individually, we have people that come up to us and say that like we've actually changed their conception of things, or their sexuality is more open now, based on like the things that they've read in PHILE
And
and
that's
things
the
they've
most
seen.
important.
Yeah, that was the point of a question. Like, how do you see yourselves? How do you see? What's your perspective on the work you've developed? Like, I've always found it quite interesting to know what the authors, the artists, the managing editors, the art directors think of their own work. So that's about it.
Yeah, we're very proud of it, I think.
Yeah.
But not too proud.
Not just a smidge. No, like I said, like the best part about working on this has been like facilitating a sense of community that really was an ethos across everything that we did. Even though all of our mediums were so disparate, they were all connected by this sense of community and creating space for community, which I think really that's what translates through the publication.
A lot of people like that would come to our events had probably never even seen the magazine,
Yeah.
but they knew our events and vice versa.
And or like our hardcore followers on social media who liked everything we did, like at magazine, you know, when it didn't
It's true.
matter, you know.
So many people go, I love your Instagram.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen the magazine? They were like, no.
So, yeah, that was important, and that's still incredibly important to me in my practice, to make space for these kinds of communities.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry. I was like, how does that relate to your question? I forgot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Don't look at me.
no. Yeah, I mean, you should be proud first, I think,
Yeah,
to
definitely.
answer that question. Because, the first thing I did when I had I say feel it because Latin, you know, file in my hands, well, like, oh, yeah, maybe something similar exists around, so before call the founders and people involved in the magazine, I want to look for it, and there wasn't. That was amazing because, I mean, for the moment, for the years, but I was like pretty impressed also by the unicity of this, and also that you already talked a lot about it, but the variety of the content. That is something that for the ones who were here for the Haman presentation, it's also something very similar to the way they collect essays and photographies, trying to not privilege any point of view, but bringing as much as people as possible with their specific point of view, because that's also a nice thing that you said, that you are not just calling expert, but people who experience that thing. Because
yeah,
it's
it's so important.
yeah, that's
Especially
very
for what
interesting.
we made, yeah.
And that's kind of actually how it started, was we were talking about the importance of sharing stories, and like, you know, as privileged people, that's literally all we can do is to listen and to share. And that's how we kind of came up with this idea.
Yeah. Also, like, sexuality to me is a very fluid thing, and if we're talking about the topic of sexuality in general, it has to be well-rounded and have as many perspectives as possible, which is, I think, part of why it's so unique, because most publications about sexuality are just geared towards like gay men or gay women or trans or whatever the case, bears or whatever, you know, the list goes on, but it's always secluded. So we wanted to try to bridge everything.
Exactly. In fact, in the last issue where there is the guy going to the therapist, and which looks like his mom, and you know, it's something that you are not expecting from a magazine like PHILE, because you say, oh, I'm gonna read something about sex, but that was of course, sex, but it was something so intimate that we were like probably not giving space of this kind. I mean, that was my idea. Then I read it. I was so happy to find also something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, well, just pointing out also the humanity and sexuality.
Yeah.
It's something that no matter how extreme some of the things
Exactly,
we
that's the
publish
thing.
are, there's something we can all relate to. Thank you.
No, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Now we can go to eat sardines again.